Peace to all the people in the house. So you see the topic, my peeps. So we're going to get right into it because I don't think a lot of people could hear the other one. All right, hold on, my peeps. We about to get into this. I know mad people are at work, but this is what we do. So we have to update what we did yesterday because I don't think people heard it. So if you didn't get to hear it, I'm only going to give you part one because we are busy with consultations today. So basically, my people, the 1923 auction letter about Tartarian banking system. So the 1923 auctions, asset seizures, and suppressed banking systems often labeled Tartarian. But we know that Tartaria was a key word for other cultures that lived on the land. Alleged 1923 auction letter, Tartarian banking system, speculative reconstruction, okay? So, to the interested parties and financial houses, be it known that pursuant to the acts of reorganized following the Great War and under authority vested by international banking compacts and domestic receiverships, the properties, instruments, and monetary mechanisms formerly operating under the old world system are hereby offered for public and private auction. Said system, known in former records as the Tartarian banking and energy credit structure, operated not on debt issuance, but on asset-backed credit, natural law exchange, and ledgered value derived from land, labor, and atmospheric force. These mechanisms, having been declared obsolete and incompatible with the Martin debt-based monetary order, their vaults, clearinghouses, and correspondent instruments have been seized, cataloged, and placed into custodial trust. Included in this auction are ledger books of pre-fiat credit balances, architectural bonds tied to civic structures and cathedrals, municipal credit engines formerly operating without interest, trust certificates issued to living men and women prior to conversion into birth registries. Notice is hereby given that all such instruments shall be conveyed without disclosure of original operation, and that purchasers shall agree not to receive, disclose, or replicate the former system of value exchange. All sales are final. All claims unasserted shall be presumed abandoned by order of the International Custodial Committee, Office of Monetary Transaction, New York. The old world is settled. The new world is leveraged. Context, people usually associate with this kind of letter. 1921 to 1933. Global reconstructing of money after World War I. Shift from asset, land, energy-backed systems to debt, bonds, fiat. Auctions, receiverships, and abandoned property sales. Suppression of non-interest credit systems. Conversion of people from living creditors to registered debtors. Create a matching auction notice, newspaper clipping, or gazette entry. Draft a banker's memo explaining why the Tartarian system was dangerous. Write a counter affidavit from a living claimant challenging the auction. Okay, my people, I have a matching auction notice written in the period authentic 1923 style. Public auction notice. Notice of sale of seized properties and financial instruments pursuant to Reorganization Acts and Custodial Authority. New York City, February 3rd, 1923. Notice is hereby given that by order of the International Custodial Committee, acting under authority of wartime receivership, emergency banking provisions, and post-war reorganization statutes, there shall be offered for sale at public auction to the highest qualified bidder the following properties, instruments, and mechanisms formerly operating under the old world credit system, commonly referenced in prior records as Tartarian. Property and instruments to be auctioned. 1. Ledger books and clearing records containing credit balances, trust accounts, and non-interest bearing exchanges predating the Federal Reserve era. 2. Municipal and architectural credit bonds, instruments attached to civic buildings, towers, cathedrals, and public works formerly operating as self-liquidating assets. 3. Trust certificates and estate conveyances issued prior to the conversion of living estates into registered birth records and statutory persons. 4. Energy and atmospheric credit devices described in obsolete engineering filings as etheric, inductive, or environmental force mechanisms. 5. Land-based value charters, establishing exchange based on acreage, productivity, and natural yield rather than debt obligation. Terms of sale. All items are sold as is without warranty, explanation, or disclosure of original operation. Purchasers acknowledge that all mechanisms herein are deemed obsolete, impractical, or incompatible with the modern banking system. No purchaser shall attempt to revive, replicate, or publicly disclose the function of said systems. All unasserted claims are deemed abandoned and permanently extinguished. Sale is final. No redemptions recognized after date of auction. And this was in 1923. Important notice. Any living claimant failing to appear, object, or assert superior title prior to the close of auction shall be presumed to have waived all rights, beneficial interests, and equitable claims. Auction to be conducted by Office of Monetary Transition under Custodial Trust, New York, New York. What is not claimed is converted. What is converted is collateralized. What is not claimed is converted. What is converted is collateralized. So in your UCC, you may want to have, when you convert on your UCC, when you collateralize, you're converting it on the UCC. You may want to use the language. What is not claimed is converted. You don't want to use that on a UCC. You may want to use what is converted is collateralized. So you're converting everything you have now, and it is collateralized on a UCC 1. Now, my people, I want to verify the historical letter. Okay? They say there is no verified historical letter from 1923 that documents an auction of Tatarian banking system. No archive, university collection, national library, or government record contains such a document under that name or description. That doesn't mean nothing happened in 1923. It means the Tartarian framing is modern, while the real documented events were described in very different language at the time. What does exist is verifiable are official letters, auction notices, and government records from 1917 to 1933 that show mass seizure and auction of property trusts, patents, and financial instruments, transfers of assets into custodial control, liquidation of obsolete or enemy systems, a forced shift into a centralized debt-based monetary order. Now, verified historical documents, real and citable. First one is Office of Alien Property Custodian, 1917 to 1934. This is the closest real world equivalent to what people now label Tartarian auctions. What exists? Official letters, public auction notices, asset seizure orders, trust liquidations, patent and bank asset sales. Authority, trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. What was auctioned? Banks and bank shares, trusts, interests, land, holdings, industrial, patents, utility, and infrastructure interests. So you may want to sign up and go to auctions because that's where all unclaimed property gets auctioned off at. Language used in letters: seized, vested, liquidated, sold at public auction, custodial trust, unclaimed interest, deemed abandoned. These documents are archived by U.S. National Archives Record Group 131, Library of Congress, Federal Register Processors. Number 2, Federal Reserve and Treasury Circular Letters 1919 to 1924. Verified circulars and correspondence announcing reorganization of banking reserves, conversion of gold certificates, elimination of non-conforming credit systems, mandatory compliance with centralized clearing. These letters do not mention Tartaria, but they explicitly describe the destruction of prior monetary systems. So, my people, I'm going to stop right there for a minute. Hang tight with me. Hang tight with me. Number 3, state and municipal auction notices 1921 to 1926. Verified notices published in state gazettes, city records, court documents. They announce auctions of defunct trusts, abandoned estates, obsolete municipal bonds, non-redeemable instruments. Again, real auctions, real notices, different vocabulary. Number 4, 1923 to 1933 gold and property confiscation letters, especially Treasury correspondence leading to Executive Order 6102. Banking circulars ordering surrender of instruments, notices voiding private settlement mechanisms. These are absolutely real and archived. Why you will not find a Tartarian letter. Tartaria was a cartographic and ethnographic term pre 1800s, not used in legal or financial correspondence. So no clerk in 1923 would write auction of Tartarian banking system. They would write liquidation of obsolete credit instruments, disposition of vested property, sale of abandoned trust interests. That's what you need to look up. Same effect, different language. Now, if you want, my people, here's something real that you can stand on. Number 1, locate and reproduce a verified 1920s auction letter. Alien property custodian, Treasury, State Gazette. Number 2, translate a real historical letter into plain English so you can see what was actually being done. Number 3, create a side-by-side comparison. Real document language versus modern Tartarian interpretation. Number 4, help you cite archives properly. National Archives record, group, date, issuing, office. Now, 1923, my people, there was no single branded name like we use today. In 1923, the U.S. banking system was referred to by function and institutions, not a unified title. What the banking system was called in 1923, 1, the Federal Reserve System, official name established in 1913. So, this was the core framework. People refer to it as the Federal Reserve banking system, the reserve system. So, my people, it consisted of the Federal Reserve Board, Washington, D.C., 12 Federal Reserve banks, member commercial banks. By 1923, this system controlled currency issuance, reserves, and interbank clearing. The national banking system still very much in use as term. This referred to national banks chartered under the National Bank Acts 1863, 1864, banks holding U.S. government U.S. bonds as backing for notes. You see phrases like, my people, national banking institutions, national currency system, national bank notes. 3, the gold standard system. Very commonly referenced, money was described as gold-backed currency, gold certificates, lawful money redeemable in gold. The U.S. was on the classical gold standard in 1923. Gold confiscation came later in 1933. Number 4, correspondent banking system, how banks actually moved money. This system involved city banks holding reserves for rural banks, clearing through New York, Chicago, and St. Louis. Layered reserve relationships. This often called the correspondent system, the reserve city system. Number 5, trust and clearinghouse system, extremely important in 1923, includes trust companies, clearinghouse associations, private settlement between banks. Terms used: clearinghouse certificates, trust company system, private banking houses. Why it was not called what it was not called. So, it was not called Tartarian. It was not called fiat system. This term comes later. It was not called the debt slavery system, modern language. It was not called central bank regime. That was an academic term used later. So, my people, to accurately describe the historical and the correct sentence would be something like, in 1923, banking operations in the United States were conducted under the Federal Reserve System, operating alongside the national banking system and governed by gold-backed currency, correspondent banking relationships, and clearinghouse settlement. Now, the banking system in 1923 was run by the keepers. So, verifiable history in 1923, there is no historical record or group officially called the keepers running the banking system. That term does not appear in laws, banking correspondence, or congressional records, or Federal Reserve documents or court opinions of the time. What does exist is something very close to what people later mean when they say the keepers, just under different names. So, to translate it, who actually ran banking in 1923 that was documented? The Federal Reserve Board and Federal Reserve banks. These were the custodians of currency issuance, reserves, interbank clearing. They were often described as guardians of reserves, custodians of credit, trustees of the banking system. Not keepers, but custodial language was constant. Number 2, trustees, custodians, and clearinghouse committees. This is the closest factual match to what you're calling keepers. Documents repeatedly refer to custodian banks, trustees, receivers, clearinghouse managers, conservators of assets. They kept gold, bonds, ledgers, trust property, seized or abandoned assets. So, why would you link your trust up with a bank without going in and having your trust on the county clerk record before you open up a bank account? You have to open up a trust account, not a checking account, not a savings account. You open up a trust account. In legal language, these people were literally keepers of accounts and property, the office of the alien property custodian. This is the key. From 1917 into the 1920s, this office seized banks, trusts, and property, held them in custodial trust, sold them at auction if unclaimed. They were legally called custodians, trustees, receivers. That is why you have to be the custodian, you have to be the trustee, and you have to be the receiver, so that they are not. Never keepers, but the function matches the ideal. Private banking houses. Number 4, private banking houses and trust companies. J.P. Morgan and Company, KUHN LOEB and Company, trust companies tied into clearing houses. They were not governments, they were private stewards of capital operating inside the system. Again, not called keepers, but they held and controlled flows of credit. Where the keeper's ideal comes from is it shows up later in esoteric writing, symbolic or initiatory language, metaphors for custodians of knowledge, ledgers, or law, modern reinterpretations of trustee power. It's a conceptual label, not historical one. So a historically accurate way to say what was talking about here is that in 1923 banking was administered by custodians, trustees, and clearing authorities who controlled reserves, credit, and settlement rather than by the public itself. So a defensible sentence, the keepers ran the system, is not unless you clearly mark it as symbolic language. So, my people, I could go on and on right now, but we're going to stop right here. And I'm going to have to come back with part two later on another day. Stay up, my people. Stay one. Stay strong. Peace to all my people in the chat. Gotta go. I am out. 407 300 5377 if you need a consultation.